Welcome to the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz, and I am on the mission to change the narrative of immigration, one immigrant story at a time. Welcome back, you guys, to another episode of the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz, and I am on the mission to change the narrative of immigration, one immigrant story at a time. However, I am starting a new segment, which is Allies of Immigrants. So I am starting to interview those who have helped immigrants in any capacity and share their story as to why it's important to them and what they do. So my first guest for this segment is Joanne, and Joanne and I connected on the Facebook group Women of Welcome. And if you've heard any episodes before, you know that I've talked about Women of Welcome, what their mission is and everything. And it's just an amazing group that really provides biblical narrative of how we should handle immigration. So Joanne and I connected there, and we talked about her work as being an immigration specialist, which I thought was really cool because I had no idea that you could even do that. So she told me a little bit about her work and how she got into it, and I just felt like she was the perfect guest for this segment. So welcome, Joanne, to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and thank you for inviting me because I love opportunities to share about all of this.
Yes, I am so happy that you said yes to doing this, and so happy that we were able to connect. And so just let's get started with you sharing a little bit of information about you, who you are, and how you got into the space.
Sure. So my name is Joanne McAfee, and I live in Delaware on the East Coast. And my husband is actually a Mexican I'm sorry. He was born in Mexico. I always say national, a Mexican national, but he hates when I say that. So sorry about that. I'm trying to correct myself. So anyway, born in Mexico, came here when he was 12. So I had a lot of really up close insight just from being, married into his family as to what it looked like when, you were new to this country. I actually got to ask him a lot of questions about, especially what it was like to be like a preteen coming into the country and not knowing any English. And, he tells me, well, I learned a lot of English from SpongeBob. And I'm like, yeah, don't tell people that. That's not as cool as you think it is. So just, hearing the story of his family and why they needed to come, things were really dangerous. They lived in a border town. And so that kind of connected me as far as like just realizing that that people do have very specific reasons why they need to leave where they are, and that it's heartbreaking for them. It's not like they just one day wake up and go, I think I want to go to the US, Yeah. So that kind of gave me some insight. And then I actually went with Women of Welcome to the border in 2019. And that was, it was probably like maybe almost a year into like the zero tolerance policy, a lot of family separation. And I wanted to go to see for myself because I knew that the things that I was hearing on the news did not line up with what I knew of my husband's family or anyone else that I knew from another country, to be honest. So I just was like, I'm going to go. I want to see for myself. I want to bear witness. I want to, hear the stories. And also, I interviewed anybody that would talk to me in El Paso, Texas. I wanted to know, like, what is it like to live in a border town? And, what are your concerns? And do you see things that make you feel unsafe? Or, what do you think? And it was an amazing trip because, I got to hear a lot of different perspectives, but overall, they really loved living in a border town. They loved having an international city. And they, often said, this is what we've always known. This is how we function. We love it. We don't really see a whole lot of like craziness on this side. Now, of course, they would say like, yes, we're becoming overwhelmed with people that are coming in,
Yeah.
but that's just because we're not really prepared to handle large groups of people like that. So um, the reason I decided to go to immigration law school was because when I was there, I realized that there are very few asylum seekers that have legal representation, and that most of them do not win their cases, even though they should. Like, they meet all the criteria legally, but they don't know how to represent themselves well. So I thought, what part can I play in making that better? So I decided to go to Villanova, and I did their program. They're one of, several different programs that people can do that want to do this kind of work. And I'm still in the process actually of getting full accreditation, but right now I just have partial, so I'm able to help people with family-based. But when I do encounter asylum seekers now, I usually will refer them to a lawyer. I'll help them, like if they're in my community, I try to help them get set up with like sources for food, people that help pay rent, like things like that. So
Yeah. Well, it's a very challenging work, I'm assuming.
it is. And I tell people all the time, Mr. Rogers used to say, look for the helpers.
Yeah.
In this space, there are so many heartbreaking and heavy stories that you hear all the time. And even legally, there are a lot more losses than there are wins. And so the only way to keep yourself balanced and not wanting to give up in this is to be really intentional about looking for the helpers. There are so many people that are working in this space that are doing amazing work, who are advocating or legally, lobbying, or just, offering pro bono services to children that, come across unaccompanied, or, there are thousands of organizations. And so I really try to keep in touch with the ones that I actually have touched personally from being at the border, but also just different ones that I got to know. Because when I worked for Women of Welcome for a year after we came back from the border, I did get to connect with a pretty wide network of people that were, working in this space.
Yeah. And so would you say that if you had not gone to the border in 2019, do you think you would be doing this type of work? Or do you think like just seeing the impact from going and seeing it firsthand, do you think like that really sparked in you to do this, to get into this?
It's really funny because I get asked that a lot.
Yeah.
I honestly think that I would have been driven to do something. I don't know that it would have looked exactly as it does now. I don't know that I would have gone like the legal route. I may have just tried to reach out within my own community to, to be more in touch with people, and to build those bridges and to try to find resources, because they are probably the most underserved in our community,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I hear you. I've also wrestled as to like what part am I gonna play into this, because in 2019 I actually took the LSAT to try to go into law school to be an immigration attorney. Now at the time I was, finishing up my master's. So my cousin who was going to law school, he was like, you can't do both. You can't do your master's and try to study for the LSAT, because you need the time that you're taking for your master's is the time that you need to take to study. So obviously I didn't do as good as I wanted to on the LSAT. So I got discouraged. And, every once in a while I was like, man, like I kind of, try to help. Like I want to be an attorney to like help and everything. But then sometimes I'm just like, what else can I do besides being an attorney to be able to help? And then obviously like God created this whole podcast to be able to provide voices for immigrants to share their story, to change the narrative. So I'm like, okay, but then sometimes I just feel like I'm not doing enough. Sometimes I'm like, this podcast is not enough. I need to do more.
I
So
think the
it
podcast
was,
is amazing.
oh, thank you, thank you. But yeah, so coming across to your post on Woven a Welcome, when you had mentioned that you got certified, partial certified. And so like I was like, man, like that's really cool that you are able, that this type of work is available without having to go through the whole law school. So can you tell us about the process of getting certified?
Sure. So there is a department of its own within USCIS. Well, it's actually part of EOIR, the immigration court system, really, that decides. It's a group of lawyers that decide on these applications as they come in for people that are applying for accreditation. So what they're looking for is, what type of education have you had? Do you have a good basic understanding of how immigration law works? So, where did you get your education? What work experience do you have? Did you do an internship, or have you maybe shadowed a lawyer for a period of time or anything like that? They're really big on continued training. So they want to know that, I had finished school in April, but I wasn't actually applying for my accreditation until October. And they were like, so what training have you done in the meantime? And I was like, oh my gosh, I just got through 28 weeks of school. What? Yeah. So I was just like, okay, I'll find something. But the cool thing is, Clinic is a really good resource because they constantly have different webinars that are going on, and they are the Catholic Legal Immigration Network. And they do charge a fee for a lot of their stuff, but some of it is free. But usually if you are working for an organization, they're affiliates, so they've paid the due, so that you actually get a reduced fee anyway when you do take their trainings. But they are excellent, and they keep everybody up to date on things. Like anytime a new policy comes out, they've got a training on it. So I feel like you could literally go into their website and pick any topic in immigration and say, I want to learn about this. And they would have at least a webinar, if not a full training on it. So that's what they're looking for. They just want to make sure that you're keeping up to date on everything, because things change constantly.
Yes.
And basically, when you go into immigration law, it isn't about knowing exactly what every law says. It's really about knowing where to find that information, because things do change constantly, and knowing where to find the updated information on the Federal Register. So they just are looking at, all of those things and saying, and then you also have to have 2 recommendations from people who have worked with you. They're looking at, are you it's like a morally fit or something like that. The wording has something to do with fitness, but it's an ethical thing. So they want to know, if we approve this person, are they going to follow the laws themselves, or, and are they actually in it to help people? Or so it is pretty, it's tedious to put together your packet, and it's a little nerve-wracking while you're waiting. But I am actually grateful that they are as picky as they are, because there are people out there that are doing immigration law that are not trained and don't know, really don't know the laws. And unfortunately, people pay them a lot of money, and then sometimes they can end up being deported because the person didn't know what they were doing. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I had a question and now it just escaped me, but hopefully it comes back. What is one thing you wish you knew before getting into this field?
I wish that I had been a little bit better with, it's really a personal thing, but I wish that I were better at not taking on the weight of everything, because there is a lot of weight, and every client that you have, their situation to them is, urgent. And so as you're trying to schedule things and make sure that you have enough time to actually do the work, and then, sitting down with so many people per week, it's really difficult sometimes not to take all of the weight of that on.
Yeah.
And to be able to be okay with the fact that, like, I'm one person and I can only do so much, and I'm doing the best that I can. I'm going to give you 100% when I sit down with you, but you might have to wait 3 weeks for that to happen. Like, being okay with the fact that some people are not going to like that answer, So, but yeah, I think I'm getting a little bit better. And yet the other side of that is I don't want to become jaded. Like, I don't want to be this person that doesn't care because, 3 people gave me an attitude today or whatever, So it's one of those things where I just try to look at their point of view, because, like I said, their situation, of course, is the most important thing to them right then, and I want to be sympathetic to that. And I do want to take care of them in a timely manner. But I also, in my past, have been a little bit of a pushover. So having to be able to set those really good boundaries and say, like, this is what I can do. This is what I can't do. It's your choice. You can take it or leave it.
Exactly. I remember the question, but your answer to this just reminded me of, I don't know if you saw the Netflix documentary Undocumented, I think it came out a few years ago. You saw it?
Yeah.
And I cried so much during that documentary because it was so heartbreaking. And so I remember, like, my husband looking over at me, he was like, "Are you sure you want to be an immigration attorney? Because I don't know if you can handle it emotionally, like the emotional aspect of it." Like, just like, it was just so heartbreaking to, like, see the stories, what was happening, what happened to the immigration attorney and everything. So it's just, it can take a toll on you emotionally. And that also reminds me, I did have an immigration attorney come on in the when I first started the episode, and same thing. He was just like, it's very emotional, like, and he's like, I sat in my car sometimes, cried, because of the cases and the things. So it's like, these are the type of things that I want people to know, because these are not the things that the news is talking about, that the media is talking about. They're not talking about those types of stories. They just have this narrative, very negative, unfortunately. And it's like, these are humans. These are humans with lives, with feelings, with, I mean, it's just, they're humans. That's just how we need to see them. We need to see them as God, what is it? The image of God. We need to see them as the image of God, just like how we are, how I am, how you are. And yeah, it's very, very heartbreaking, these stories. The question that I remembered was, how long was the accreditation process? I'm sorry to go back to that, but I remember the question.
So the accreditation process, unfortunately, under the last administration, they had cut a lot of funding to this department. So they had whittled down to where they were understaffed. And then when they had an influx of people that were trying to get accreditation, they were just backlogged. And so before I applied, they told us it could take 8 or 9 months to get your accreditation, which doesn't sound like a really long time to some people, but when you're waiting to be able to, do the work that you trained for, and you have to put everything through someone else to have it checked and put it under their name and number for representation, it gets, it's frustrating. But for me, I applied in October and I received my accreditation the end of January. So it wasn't that bad. Yeah, but they had hired, we actually in Vista with Villanova, we had advocated for more funds for them so that they could hire more lawyers to come in and work. So I think it worked.
Yes. And someone who's interested in getting into this type of work, what does your day-to-day look
So it's very unpredictable.
like?
And that's also something that I struggle with a little bit because I have ADHD. So I like lists and I like plans because I have to accommodate myself or else I'll be all over the place.
Yeah.
So what happens is I might say, okay, I have, 2 or 3 appointments today at whatever times. In between that, I'm going to work on this, this, and this. Every day I have a list and I check my stuff off as I, go through it so that I make sure that I'm not forgetting anything. But in the meantime, you're going to probably get anywhere from 2 to 10 calls a day of other people who either have questions or they want to set an appointment or they need help with something. They need you to refer them somewhere. And so those calls can, sometimes they're just a few minutes and sometimes they're an hour. So it's just unpredictable. And I have had to really learn to go with the flow and to accept that, every person is equally important. And if they need something, that's what I'm here for. So I'm going to spend the time with them. But yeah, that gets a little nerve-wracking because I love to be able to cross stuff off my list.
Yes. Because then you don't feel like you did anything. It's like, I didn't get anything done off my list.
You're like, those 6 calls were not on the list.
Exactly.
Dang it.
Why do you think this type of work is important, or why is it important for you personally?
Well, I think that my biggest, motivator for educating myself initially was that there's so much misinformation.
Yes.
And most people, and I have to say, even though it's really easy to come down on people and say, well, they don't know what they're talking about or whatever, most people don't have proximity to someone who is going through the immigration process. People that have really strong opinions about it are really not educated on it. So what's happening is they don't have any reason to research it. They don't have anybody in their life that is a good source to give them real information. So they're listening to other people who are talking about it, spreading misinformation, and they're just assuming that it's correct. So then they react to misinformation and then it becomes this like emotionally charged thing. So I try to be really patient with people because I know that they don't know what they don't know, So, but I think that it is important, one, to have the education so that I can help to educate people who want to learn. Not everyone wants to learn. But and I try to be respectful of that too, because I'll say, do you mind if I share, and if people are like, I don't want to hear that, I'm like, okay, good. Then neither of us wasted our time. But yeah, it's important to know. And then it's also important to have the education if you want to advocate, because how do we know what needs to be changed unless we know what it is right now, And then I also, when I come to the table to advocate, I want to speak, intelligently. I want to be able to say like, well, this policy said this, or, the law says this or whatever, and be able to cite my resources and so all of that has been really great for that. But it's also just been amazing because I have always believed that as the human race, we all belong to one another, and it doesn't matter where we come from. So I feel as though if we're not connecting with people from other cultures, we're missing out on a lot of opportunities to learn and to just experience a different way of seeing things, or they experience things a little differently than we do. And we just have such a limited worldview if we're not connecting that way. So I think it's important for building bridges, for, having a sense of communal responsibility, which we don't have a lot of that in this country. And just being able to, choose not to make someone who's different than me my enemy. So.
That was such a beautiful answer, and just so many things came to mind, especially, I'm a woman of faith, and they always talk about how we're called to make disciples, we're called to spread the gospel, and it's there's always people going on, you hear them going on mission trips, right, to all these other countries to speak about Jesus. And it's we have a lot of people from different countries here in our own backyard, in our own community, that we can, spread the gospel to. But a lot of people, because of fear of the unknown, or just fear of, people looking different or anything, or different cultures, it's we limit ourselves, like you said. But there are people who don't have in their communities people who look different. That's another challenge too. So they would have to be intentional to get out of, to find people who look different than them, to interact and things like that. But we should not be afraid of each other. We shouldn't, we should just try to be open to learn, open to see things differently, different perspective. And that is what one of my guests had mentioned about at first, that diversity here was kind of a challenge for her. But then as she grew older and time went on, she realized what a blessing it was to just have the diversity that we do have here in the United States, just because you can learn so much from so many different cultures and things, and from different people right here, right in this great nation. So thank you so much for that answer. That was so beautiful. Perfectly said. What is one misconception about the immigration process that you hear the most?
I would have to say this idea of people being allowed in illegally, because whether you come to a port of inspection or you go around and are apprehended by someone, there is a legal process in place that Border Patrol and CBP are following. So they are bound to follow the process as it states in their whatever policy books. So they're processing according to the law as far as allowing people to come in. I've heard a lot of people say, for instance, I don't even remember his name, so I couldn't tell you, but I was watching Congress talk about immigration maybe a couple weeks ago. And one of the gentlemen was saying that the Secretary of Homeland Security does not have the authority to allow all these people to have parole at the same time. But so I went and looked up the law because I was I'm pretty sure he does, but let me go check,
Yeah.
So, and it absolutely says that it is up to his discretion. And so the problem is that they're thinking that parole should only be given on a case-by-case basis. And that's true to an extent, but what's happening is you're having thousands of people come from Haiti. Okay. Haiti right now falls under temporary protected status. So if they come to the border, they are allowed to come in and be paroled for 1 year. Within that year, if they don't apply for anything, they're supposed to leave. What people also don't understand is that regardless of what you fall under, if you're admitted to the country under parole, you are also immediately put into removal proceedings. They give you a notice to appear in court as well. And so if you don't get the ball rolling by applying for something, you are removable, right? So it's like, come on in, but we're going to kick you out. So, but come on in. And I don't think people understand that. I think that they literally think that we just like have swung the doors wide open, and we're just like, everybody come, it's okay, no problem, right? And so, and I think that if more people understood, the law and how it works and what it says they're allowed to have and not to have. One, I think it probably would put people a little more at ease, because it isn't as free and like whatever as people think it is. But also I really would love to like not hear people called illegals, because I don't believe that a person can be illegal. Like your action is either illegal or not illegal, but like you as a person cannot be illegal, in my opinion. So when people come and they're paroled in, it is because they fall under usually some type of a humanitarian program, whether it's asylum, whether they're a refugee, or whether they are getting temporary protected status, or any other program that falls under humanitarian, like the Ukrainians have their own program, the Afghanistans have their own program. So it just depends on what country they're from. But yes, as someone who's coming from that country to our border, if they show their documents and they fall under that, Border Patrol and CBP are going to admit them, because that is what the law says. So
yes.
Sorry, that was really long-winded, but it's just so frustrating because, I hear people and if we were doing that, if we were just saying like, okay, anybody can come in and we're not even going to check anybody, nobody's going to be vetted, of course, that would be terrifying. So this is what they're responding to. Right. Yeah, nobody does want that. You're right. Nobody wants that.
Because, there's good people and there's bad people. We know that from everywhere. Right. And it's like, we don't want just everyone and anyone coming into the country. That is not what we want. But what we do want is for people to be treated as humans, as they are, with dignity, with respect, and to be taken their cases serious. Like there are countries, where it is dangerous to live. And there are countries where it is even dangerous to have a certain faith. Like a lot of people can't even practice their certain faith. And they, that is a reason that they can come here. If they really feel like if they are in danger, for being practicing their faith, like that is a reason that they can come and seek asylum here. I can't remember what the comment said exactly, but I ended up looking to see which country actually admits the most, I think, refugees. And I found a list of like the top 10 countries that have like the most refugees. And that the United States was not even in the top 10.
That does not surprise me.
Yeah. So I was like, wow, this person's comment is completely like, so I looked at it. I will try to find that article and post it in the show notes, because I found that really interesting. I was like, wow, the United States is not even in the top 10 countries that has the most refugees. So it's very not contradicting, but like very, contradicting to what beliefs or like what is being spread. It's like that we have these open borders and just everyone is here and coming and accepted, and it's like we're not even in the top 10, guys. So so I found that very interesting.
Something else that I just wanted to say really quickly is what you were saying about how, as people of faith, like we're taught that we're supposed to, share our faith and spread the gospel and make disciples and all of that. Something else that really hit me when I went to the border was the fact that most of the people that were coming from Central America were people of faith as well.
Thank you. Yes.
And I was like, their faith puts my faith to shame, because I have not walked through near what they have. And not to say that I would want to, but I feel as though in our country, we have it pretty good and we're a little on the spoiled side. So like when things don't go well, sometimes we get a little bit of an attitude with God, and they walked through way worse than I, ever probably will. And they still held on to the goodness of God and the faithfulness of God. And
Yeah.
it just blew me away,
Yeah. I believe the majority, or like the main religion in Central America is Catholic. Like the majority are
Yes,
Catholic.
I think
So
so too.
yes. So, me having a Hispanic background, my parents are Catholic. I don't practice any religion, but my family overall, we all believe in God. But it is faith plays a big part in the Hispanic community and like how they live their life, the choices that they make, and things like that. So thank you for saying that, because this is very, very true. The majority of people that come from Central America, like they are, full on believers of God and very big on their faith and things like that. And I think I think there was a question that Women of Welcome had put out asking, like, what if the people who are coming, or some people who are coming because they're following what God is telling, like God is telling them where to go, right? What if
Yeah.
they're following, what God is telling them? And I was like, that is a
They're
very good
missionaries to
question.
us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. So I was like, that is very interesting. Like I had not even, thought about that. It's like not even just running for their lives. It's like, what if God is calling them to come to the United States, So that is a question to ponder on, guys.
Yes, for
um
sure.
I would like, or if you can, provide encouragement to someone who may be interested in getting into this realm in the whole immigration, or wants to start advocating, just like, just some encouragement for that person.
So the schooling part of it, it can be a lot, especially if you're working full time. But I will say that that every program that is out there is doable because it doesn't last forever. It's a season, and you work really hard for that season, and then the reward comes, and you're like, okay, I finished it, and I am over 50, so if I can do
No.
it.
Oh
Yes,
my
I
gosh,
am. Yes, and
Joanne, no
so
way.
I am. So my brain, like, I thought to myself, how am I going to do this? Like the law is so complicated. But once I got in it, and because I loved it so much, and that is where my passion lies. So I just ate it all up, and it was so good. So for people that are feeling like, this is where their passion is, and they want to know how to, better help or better advocate, it's definitely something that I would encourage anybody to do it, honestly, because even if you don't go this route, there's a lot of other things that you can do with it.
Yeah.
I would also say that it's very much needed because in the United States, there are less than 12,000 immigration lawyers, and there are only about 2,400 accredited representatives.
Wow.
So that means nationally, for every person who is qualified to do this work, there's about 1,460 people that need services.
And this is why it's backlogged, because
Yes.
there's not enough people working in this realm. Wow.
Right. And even with USCIS, they're getting millions of applications a day.
Yes. Yes.
And
Like,
they're trying to get through them as quickly as they can, and they still feel like they need to add more people, to be able to deal with the backlog. So yeah, and of course it's not slowing down, because we do have more people that are coming every day. So if we don't have the people doing the work in the middle, it's like how do we ever get on top of it?
yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. Believe I mentioned it in another episode before, but I know a family who are seeking asylum, and they waited 7 years to be seen by immigration judge to hear their case, and then now they have to wait. It could be up to 2 more years to just get the answer. And so in that time period, they can't leave the country. So like they can't see family, like they're just kind of stuck in limbo pretty much, like not
Yeah.
knowing if they're going to be able to stay or not. Like And that's almost a decade just waiting for the case, and then 2 more years to just get an answer. So yes, people, it is very, very backlogged. So if you feel a fire or very passionate to get into this realm, we need you. We
Yes,
yes, go for it.
please.
We need all the help we can get.
Please
Oh,
come do the work.
yes.
We need you.
All right. Joanne, the last question that I have for you before we wrap this up is, how do you think the American dream differs between immigrants and native born Americans?
I don't really think it differs. I think that we all want, good lives for our kids. I think we all want to be able to pay our bills and put food on the table. I think we all would like to be able to, go to sleep at night knowing that we have a little bit of money in the bank in case an emergency comes up. And I think that that's where, people like to fill in the blanks and guess what other people's intentions are. And a lot of times we don't have those conversations to actually know. So it's really, we have so much more in common than we have that's different, you know? So I think that if people could, humanize others, like you're saying, and realize that they are exactly the same goals and dreams and desires that we have, it's not hard to see why they would want to come to a place that has plenty of work, that has, yes, like if you qualify for it, you might get free medical, like that. There are things that people need to be able to take care of their families. And I feel as though, especially within this country, none of us are actually from here except for the Native Americans. So
People
a
forget
whole
that.
other
People
topic,
forget
right?
that.
That's loaded in itself.
Yes.
But, so I feel like none of us should be laying claim to these things as though, they're mine and I have to keep them for myself. Like they're there for people that need them. And I mean, I've been in both positions. I've been in the position where like I had to have food stamps to feed my kids. And I've been in a position where I had plenty of money in the bank to help somebody else with groceries, So I just think that I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take to help people to like bridge the gap other than just like what you're doing, sharing people's stories and helping to get that kind of information out there so that people will hear it and be like, well, I relate to that. Like maybe I don't relate to what I think is going on at the border, but I relate to this mom who has a sick kid who, needed to come because there was a specialist here that could save their life or whatever, like whatever the situation is. But yeah, I don't think it's different. I think we all dream this, the same important things.
Oh, that's beautiful. So beautiful. So many things came to mind, especially the part that we're more the same than what we are different, because I've gotten a question. I am guest sometimes on podcasts who share about my podcast, and they have asked me like, what is one thing that you've learned with listening to like all these stories? And I'm like, honestly, it's that we are more alike than what we are different. Like just listening to, even though there's like so many different cultures and different backgrounds and things like that, but it's like, believe it or not, like a lot of the guests have similar answers to the questions that I asked them. And it's just reminds me like we are more alike than what we are different. And you stated it too. And it just reminds me that at the end of the day, we're all children of God and we're all here temporarily. Like you said, like we try to say like, no, this is our country and our land and everything, but it's like, this is all temporary, and why not try to live a life peacefully and loving and just try to help wherever we can in the small amount of time that we have here. So Joanne, thank you so much for this, for sharing your work, for sharing your heart, and for sharing just what you're doing. I pray for you. I pray for, what you're doing. Just thank you so much for sharing, and God bless you tremendously.
Thank you. Thank you. You as well. Thanks,
Thank
Heidi.
you.
Appreciate it.